There are multiple ways to keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast. Through our Instagram handle, the Wolf Connection Pod, and for comments and questions, send us an email to podcast@wolfconnection.org with your comments, questions, and guest ideas for Stephen and myself. You may hear your question answered on an upcoming podcast. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Calfa. Let's talk about some more. Joining us via Zoom from Prairie, Montana, he wears many hats. He is an award-winning conservation and wildlife filmmaker, photographer, and writer. He is the author of his upcoming book. This is just the working title, so it may change, but Finding Marley, which is due out in 2023. He won Best Environmental Documentary at the 2021 LA Film Festival for The Beast of Our Time, Grizzly Bears, and Climate Change. And he also has a podcast called Take It Outside. Brad Orsted. Brad, great to meet you, man. How are you?
I'm well. Great to meet you guys, too. I'm glad we can make this work.
Yeah, 100%. And this was, Stephen, we've been following you for a little while and just looking at just the incredible shots that you have just alone on your Instagram. And we're obviously going to go and promote your website throughout the podcast and at the end as well. Those of you that are looking for wildlife shots for your home, for just to have them in your possession, Brad has taken some incredible shots throughout the course of his career. So we'll touch on a lot of that. But we want to know, how did you start really get into this? Was this something in your childhood that you were an outdoors kid, you were running around doing stuff, had a camera in your hand, or did it sort of evolve over time? How did that start to happen for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was a kid, someone gave me a Kodak Brownie, an old camera. And I don't even know if they still made film for it back then, but I used to walk around with that thing and take mental pictures with it. And I would click and snap, and, there's no film in it. And so I carried that around for years. And then as a kid, I was just outside a lot. Like, I did not like video games. I never had video games. All that stuff was getting big when I was a kid, and everybody wanted to sit inside. And I was always an outdoor kid. So I was always running around, usually terrorizing as a kid, younger kid, throwing apples at cars and doing what kids do outside, running around, fishing, having fun. I was just an outdoor kid. I never liked to be inside.
Did you grow up in Montana, or did you move there? So you're like a lifelong Montanan, or how did you get to Prairie, Montana eventually?
No, I'm a transplant out here. I grew up in the Midwest. I was born in Iowa. And then we moved to Indiana when I was little. And then I spent all of my, up and through high school, I was in Indiana. And then I got out of there as fast as I could. So I think I took a Greyhound bus in, I think, 1989. I think I had $180 in my pocket and took off to Colorado, and just, I knew I wanted to be around mountains. I wanted to be outdoors. I wanted to get out of the Midwest. I just wanted to get out of that mentality. And, I saw a lot of people there that great people, but they get stuck in factory jobs, and you're 18 making great money, and then you're 58 and it's not great money anymore. Right. And you just see what they get sucked into. And I didn't want that. So I bolted Colorado, bounced around for a little bit, ended up back in Michigan. We got married. And then after we lost our daughter, my wife at the time was offered a job out in Yellowstone. So that's how we ended up in 2012 out living actually in Yellowstone.
And how did you make sort of that transition? Sometimes it's, very logical for people, and sometimes it's a huge leap, but that transition from photography to filmmaking.
Yeah. So, I went to school for photography, and I did some photojournalism stuff for the newspaper and freelance stuff, some animals, but I was back in Indiana and Michigan. So it's a lot of cows. And I moved out to Colorado, or to Yellowstone, and I had the Canyon wolf pack in my backyard. And so I started out photographing them. And then a good friend, Casey Anderson, who is a Nat Geo host, had his own show. We became friends, fast friends out there. And after a couple of years, he saw my still photography, and he said, "Well, I want to hire you to do film work." And I said, I don't know anything. I'm a stills guy. I don't know anything about filming. And he's like, "Dude, all you got to do is flip the switch. You have a little switch on the back of your camera, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Just start flipping the switch." And so I did, and then I'd get crappy footage, and then I'd miss the shot too, and it was so frustrating. So, in 2014, I went to work at Casey's new production company. It was new then. It was called Vision Hawk, and so I started as his director of photography. And he said, I've been watching you. You've got the patience, the passion. If you don't love that schedule, it'll kill you. I mean, it's up at 2 a.m. You got to get out to a spot with all your gear, blah, 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 but carrying packs, filming. It's long days. It's not fun, and it's not cinematic when you're doing it. It's a grind. And if you don't love it, you'll hate it. And so that's why he said, I can teach you the rest. Sequences, wides, tights, all that crap. I can teach you that. What I need is someone who will follow me up and down every mountain without asking why. Just follow and listen. And maybe he saw that Midwestern cow in me, right? That would just work and just, if I thought there was something beautiful to see at the top of the mountain, let's go, right? Like, I'll take the heavy pack. Let's go.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, because we had Casey on, I think, either last week or 2 weeks ago. Man,
for real?
Yeah. We had Casey on, and it's wow. That's what I mean. How small is the world, and to be able to make that connection, that must have been. I mean, for you as a Midwestern kid to come out here, and all the events that led up to this, and that now you're, like you said, you're trekking across mountain ranges and just filming whatever comes across. I mean, Casey's. Again, his website, his visual eye is unbelievable. I mean, just the trailer for his reel is unbelievable. Well, what's that collaboration been like for both of you? How long have you guys been working together, and how do you guys figure out how to do these projects together and make them work so well?
When Casey started, it was just him and I and another girl, and so for the first 2 years, it was just us running around like maniacs with like $500,000 gimbals mounted on top of trucks and just chasing cats and chasing everything. I mean, we had like people from the Cougar Project like sending us notes like for the Yellowstone Cougar Project. They're like, how are you guys seeing so many cats? We didn't use dogs. We didn't use telemetry. We just got after it every day. And you start learning their habits and patterns and all that stuff. So it was just Casey and I for the first couple of years. And then in 2017, I went out on my own. I did some contract work with Casey, and then Jurgen Hansen. We did that, The Return of the Wolf in Yellowstone. So that was a co-pro with Vision Hawk and Jurgen Hansen, Prospect TV for French-German PBS. And then after that, in 2018, we'd opened up a cafe and lodge in Gardner, Montana. And I kind of stepped away from some of the filming a little bit to run that. And then baking those late weird nights ended up turning into writing a memoir of all things. So I spent from 2018 until this year, almost 4 years writing that. So I've kind of stepped away from that, from the filmmaking stuff. It was an incredibly wild, fun ride. And I just knew I just came to associate Casey with really sore knees and seeing beautiful amazingness. It would hurt so bad sometimes. It must be like what women go through with childbirth and then never do it again, right? And same thing with Casey. There's times I'm like, dude, I'll never follow him again, ever again, right? And then he texts me. He's like, got a fresh set of mountain lion tracks. I'm like, I'll be there in an hour. Let's go, right? So it was really fun to be there at the infancy of that when it was just him and I running around with crazy toys, and we would chase lions all day, and then we would go drink beers at Chico like Vikings all night and laugh about it. And like we were up with headlamps in the dark chasing cats for most people were up for work.
So cool.
It was an amazing ride.
Isn't that a funny thing too? I find that mainly with outdoor centric activities, you maybe you plan like a long backpacking trip and you end up sore and tattered, but no matter how much you got beat up and think, okay, I'm going to need a long break before the next one. As soon as the soreness wears off, you're back to planning the next adventure, and you completely forgot the struggle.
It's not unlike how many times have we gone out and slugged beers like Vikings, and the next day, you're like, no more, never again, never again. And as soon as you start feeling a little better, you're like, I don't know, maybe a couple or whatever, right? It's like that same thing. I think the that stuff gives you that reconnection. It's a natural high, right? That your body responds to. You psychologically respond to that, and it likes it. And once the soreness goes away or whatever, I think you start to crave that, right? That peace, that happiness, that good tired that you get from a trail.
Yeah, you just can't wait for the next one. But yeah, so everything you just said makes me wonder if photo and video is kind of just like the perfect medium for you to further experience the outdoors and further experience nature. Do you consider it to be a vehicle for that, or do you feel like you have a different, more personal connection specifically with photography and video? Like if it did not yield, sights of grizzly bears in mountains, do you think that you would find a way to utilize photography and video, or would you refocus your efforts on something that would yield those grizzly sightings and those wolf sightings in those mountains? Like which one of these is really like, has your soul?
I found that writing is a lot lighter. That's for sure. A backpack with a pen and a legal pad is a lot lighter than a 90-pound backpack with camera gear and everything. It'll always be a part of me. I'm a natural born storyteller, and I like telling those stories and those little vignettes from the wild and maybe some of the overlooked stories. And for years when I was under contract, you have to produce, right? And I go out maybe 20 days in a row in Yellowstone and get nothing. And I've got to deliver stuff, and it gets panicky. And I'm racing to film, and I'm filming mountain lions. And I get home and I look at the footage and I'm like, I shot that? Oh my gosh. Like I didn't even enjoy it. Yeah. I was so busy pulling focus and messing with f-stops and okay, go in tight, go out wide, make sure, oh my gosh, I have a mountain lion. It could disappear any second. I've got to do all this stuff. I go back and look at the footage. I wasn't there. Yeah. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't there. So these days when I go out and I'm not on project, I just turn it off sometimes and just sit with a bear or just sit with the wolves out in the meadow. It's a long shot anyways. And all I'm going to do is come home and erase them. And I want to be there. That's what got me out there in the first place, was that sense of belonging out there. Right. And when you're racing, trying to do something, you're not there. Right. You're not breathing it in. You're not feeling it. I realized that when I get close to grizzlies, my ears start to ring. And I realized that when I was filming one time, and I had to start shutting the camera off. And now I can, if I get this high pitched like tinnitus, I'm like, there's a bear in the area.
No way.
There's a bear. Right.
Wow.
So it's those things that you can, that awareness, that mindfulness. It's nice to be in that mode now too.
Yeah. And
just to be able to enjoy it. And I've got thousands and thousands. We were shooting a grizzly bear photographing in the park a while back, and it's terrible light, and she's clear off, and there's bison poop all around her, and she lifts her head, and it sounds like Wimbledon next to me, and I didn't shoot, and the guy next to me goes, you're not gonna shoot grizzly bear? I go, I got enough bad grizzly bear photos and bad light. And he's like, my I'm like, that did sound kind of pompous, didn't it?
That's
right?
incredible.
I'm like, but I hold my finger down on the shutter. I got thousands of bad animal images, right? So now I know where the gaps are in my inventory and my portfolio, and that's what I'm looking to fill, or just shut it off and be there. Yeah.
How does that feel? Yeah, I mean, just describe the feeling of being out in the field for 2 weeks and not seeing anything. How do you deal with that?
It's terrifying. It really is. It's one of the most stressful jobs I've ever had. And I worked in sales and marketing and ran crews and stores and sales quotas. And this is like that. And it's just, I had to adopt the attitude that every day I didn't get something, I was one day closer to getting something good. You just have to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. You have to have short-term memory loss, and just yesterday was yesterday. Get up again at 3 a.m. Do the things you need to do. Get your batteries charged, your media, get your stuff ready. Do a gear check. Get out where there's animals. And it's amazing. And it really is. You just got to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And that's where people that don't love it will hate it.
Yeah. What's that like for you when because you said belonging. What is the place that you go to that you feel that sense of belonging and you just shut it all off and you're able to what sort of things run through your mind or don't run through your mind that you're able to just settle? Because I feel that way sometimes at Wolf Connection, where there's a million day-to-day tasks, things that have to be done, and then I'll just sit in one of the enclosures with one of the wolves and it's the most peaceful feeling I've ever had, and it will be the most stressful week. So how do you get to that point, and what is that like for you?
I had some pretty big experiences with big predators and big animals that really put me in my place. And I realized when I was young and dumb and chasing stuff, um, I pushed my luck on some things. And so now I really like to give everything a very respectful distance. And maybe it was from the overload that I don't need to go get wild anymore. I don't need to go be next to grizzlies. I can go sit in the yard and listen to the birds, right? They all go crazy when you walk out, and then you just sit and settle and they go back to what they're doing. And it's like a conduit now where I can tap being in Botswana and hearing the lions roar, right? Just sitting next to the Yellowstone River. And I think it's just shutting off that internal dialogue, like, all the stuff that comes flying in and everything you're telling yourself. And it's just mindfulness and just gratitude for me. I just, most days I'm just happy to be here still, and it's just that gratitude attitude of just like you said, just sit next to a wild animal or sit next to something who doesn't have all that funky energy around them, right? They are in the moment, right? They don't run on the sympathetic nervous system, right? They can't. They deal with stuff as they need to, and then they go back to a normal life. And it's calming to sit next to that and see something that truly lives in the moment, because we don't. We vacillate between the past and the future constantly in our heads.
Yeah, memory and imagination.
So I mean, Brad, we kind of glossed over a little bit in the beginning, and you talked about your daughter passing. If you don't mind just going into just the basic of what happened and that trend, when did this happen, and what was the transformation like? Where were you coming from? Were you already working with Casey at this point, and you were filming and photographing, and the tragedy that happened with your daughter, and tell us about how that really impacted you and how those things sort of move forward.
Sure. Yeah. Our daughter, Marley, was born April 15th, in 2009. And July 15th, 2010, when she was 15 months old, we were living in Michigan, and I took her to my mom's house for her first overnight visit. And within 24 hours, she was dead. We never did find out what happened. There was investigations. There was court cases. My mom was charged with misdemeanor, lying to investigators, multiple stories. We never did find out what happened. And so I really felt like I lost my daughter and my mom that day in July. And, I was already a beer drinker, and I went to the doctors. I go to a doctor and tell them what happened, therapists, they'd start crying. And I'm like, well, that's not a good prognosis when I'm telling them what happened. They start crying. And so they put me on like Xanax and Ativan and Trazodone and all of these drugs and said, don't drink with these. And what I heard was definitely drink with these. And so then I started mixing pharmaceuticals and alcohol. And, I felt guilty. I felt responsible. I felt like I delivered my daughter to her death. And there was some of the other side of the family at the time that kind of reinforced that. And so I felt like it was my fault. And this is 2010. We're living in Michigan. 2011, we just couldn't stay in that big house anymore. We had two other daughters. My wife at the time had two daughters from a previous. And so every day was just a mirror of what happened. You see that hurt in little kids, and I realized their childhood's over at that age. I felt responsible for all of it. So my wife at the time said, I applied. She said, what do you think about moving to Yellowstone? And I said, I don't think about moving to Yellowstone. And she said, well, you care if I apply for a job? And I said, knock yourself out. So she did. She got the job. And I said, well, what am I going to do out there? And the CEO for Yellowstone Association called me, and he said, I know what happened. And I looked at some of your work. I know you're a photojournalist back there, but would you consider coming out to Yellowstone and teaching photography? And I said, well, I'll have to think about, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. That sounds good. Right. And I told my editor at the paper, I said, good news, bad news. I got to turn in my notice. because I'm moving out to Yellowstone to teach photography. And he said, if you got to go work in another paper, I get it, but you don't got to make up these big fancy stories about Yellowstone. I said, oh, I'm for real. So we moved to Yellowstone in January of 2012. And I had the Canyon Wolf Pack in my backyard. Like, I was flipping pancakes and drinking coffee and watching wolves. And it was just unreal, like right out of the gate. And so I started photographing them. And then we were trying to get a younger group of kids, of people to join Yellowstone Association at the time. And I said, I'd watched Casey's show back in Michigan. And I told my ex-wife at the time, I said, get a hold of Casey. I said, he drinks beer in a hot tub with a 900-pound grizzly. I think he lives right up the road. Kids love him. And so we booked this meeting at Chico. And she said, will you come with me? I don't know anything about him. And I said, I don't know him. Right. And so we went, and she went to the bathroom, and Casey and I started showing each other on our phones, like, oh yeah, well, look at this. Like, look at this wolf, look at this bear, look at this. And pretty soon she's out of the meeting. Right. Like, she's just grabbing us beers at that point. Right. And so Casey and I became fast friends. And then I told him eventually kind of what happened. And I think that's why Casey had a soft spot for me, that I'd been through hell. And so he just started taking me out in the wild, right? Just teaching me everything. I knew nothing about animals out here, nothing about predator. He used to say, I said, I'm not going to run from a grizzly bear. I'm not a runner. He's like, been close to a grizzly bear yet? I said, no. He's like, you don't know if you're a runner, right? So he took me on some of the craziest adventures that I'm like, did we seriously just do that, see that, and come away from that? And he's laughing, like he's enjoying it. And I'm, mine's more of a nervous laugh. So that's how it all came about, is through tragedy that we ended up out in Yellowstone, and it was those times watching the wolves were the first time that I wasn't just quagmired in grief and horror, right? It was like a break from that just looping hell in my head, after a year and a half of just every day looping that Marley's death and my role and what the heck happened, and we'll never know. But while I'm out watching the wolves, I forgot all about it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, do you think those moments with wildlife and the mountains where, something could go, you're in a situation where it could go either way. You feel like those are instrumental in recentering you after something like that impactful?
Absolutely. I needed a hard wake up. And like I said, I was bumbling around. I was getting comfortable. There's wolves in the backyard. I'm like, I got this. I'm a wildlife guy. And, I just moved here. I had taken some courses, read some books. So I go out and see the animals during the day, and then I go home at night and drink.
Yeah.
Alone, in the garage by myself until I just be out of it. And I wrote one night in my journal, the best thing that could happen to me is I just pass out or die somewhere in the backcountry, and the birds and the bears could eat me and ship me out somewhere beautiful. That'd be the best. That was my best prognosis. And then about less than a week later, I'm out on this place called Swan Lake Flats, and I'm hungover and, woe is me stuff. And a grizzly bear lifts its head, and not aggressive, but it looked right through me. And I remember I let out something between like a burp and a moan, just kind of some kind of noise. And the bear walked off, and I realized right then, I'm like, I do not want to be eaten and shit out somewhere beautiful anymore. Nope. Right. Like, scratch that. It seemed very romantic with a couple Coronas the other night in my journal, but the reality of standing next to something that could oblige your suicidal fantasy, that's reality, right? That snapped me hard and quick. And I just started bawling out there. Like, it all just started coming out. And I realized I didn't want to die. I just didn't know how to live.
I think the most incredible thing that people are able to do is find a way to live, find a way to thrive through things like this. It seems almost impossible, from the outside, but then when you're in it, not everyone finds a way, but I think it's incredible that some people do find a way to live through this stuff. And I'm going to be a dad in August, and I can't even fathom the emotional impact of those things already. And I haven't even seen him. So, I just want to say that I'm in awe of how you've gotten here. But do you remember the exact moment if that it was that the exact moment you realized you're gonna survive this, you're gonna be able to live through this?
I wish, man, I wish that would have done it. I think that's changed the trajectory of my life. It was shortly, already been hanging with Casey a little bit then. And I kind of told him a little bit about it. And it got me to the point where I still had suicidal issues after that, but it wasn't like every day, right? And I didn't want to kill myself because necessarily the sadness. I wanted to go find my daughter, right? That was more of it. I wanted to go wherever she was at this point, right? Compounded with the sadness and guilt. But that bear, it really made me like take a hard look at my own BS, right? And while I was wallowing in it, right? And it's hard not to when your daughter's killed and you don't know what happened. But I was wallowing in this stuff, right? And you just loop and it loops. And it was that moment with that bear, at least. I said, okay, something changed. There's a little seam out there where everything just changed for me in the wild. Like I had this almost schizophrenic breakdown out there where I go, okay, I'm not going to kill myself. I don't want to be eaten. I don't want to die out here in the backcountry like I fantasized about. I want to live. So I just started watching those animals and filming those animals and trying to learn. I wanted to own my emotional landscape like I watched a grizzly bear own a meadow. They walk out on a meadow, they're like, anybody got a problem with this? Right? That's how I wanted to be inside, right? When I see this bison, the storm come in, the bison face into the storm. They stop and play in the storm, right? Thus depriving it of its ferocity. So I wanted to live like that. So I was taking those things I was learning with Casey and out in the wild. And then I had some amazing Crow Indian friends who kind of took me in and showed me the right way and got me cleaned off. So all these things were just coming together and dovetailing. But I had no idea what was happening. I just know I felt a little bit better each time I did it. So I just kept doing it.
Man, I mean, listen, my condolences to you, first of all. And then secondly, I echo Stephen that your perseverance through all of it to get to where you are right now is incredible. It's just amazing. The story and how you are where you are right now. What do you think it is about wildlife or animals in general? Because you talked about, obviously, the grizzly bear encounter was the main catalyst for, like you said, for having this breakdown and then this rebirth almost. But why do you think, maybe just speaking from your perspective, that looking and sitting with wildlife can be that conduit of trying to find peace and serenity and acceptance for what's going on, as opposed to possibly, I'm sure there was family or friends or someone, people involved in your life that were trying to help you get over it. But what's the difference when it's just being in the wildlife and listening and seeing and watching those things?
I don't think this life that we live now is so new. I really don't think our brains have caught up, right? Racing from jobs and paying mortgages and all this other stuff. This was in the past 100 years or so, right? Before that, how long did we live close? Nature wasn't a place we visited, like Gary Snyder's quote is something. Nature isn't a place we visit; it's home. It was home for us, right? We sat by so when I went into treatment, I quit drinking in 2018 and I went into treatment, and they went around this thing of, what do you do to fill in the spare time? People are giving the canned answers. And I said, well, I meditate under a Douglas fir tree and I follow a couple orphan grizzly bear cubs. And she goes, oh, you like new age stuff. And I said, honey, what you're trying here is new age.
Yeah.
What I'm doing, people have been doing for 10,000 years,
Exactly.
Sitting under a tree. It's because that is our home. That is where we are supposed to be. That's where our connections are. That's where the energy that flows through us, that flows through the planet, that is, we're part of all of this stardust, right? And that's our home. And I think that's why when we sit out there and you center, right, and you actually put some body parts in the dirt, touch the ground, feel it, right? It's like nature's pharmacy. It's open 24/7. There's no side effects, right? The only thing you have to do is you have to put in some effort and you have to be mindful of it. And, my Native friends have taught me the importance of ritual and symbolism and things we do every day to ensure success in those things, right? And that's it. It's that connection and appreciating it and realizing that, I felt like I lost my mother, but I realized I always have a mother. As long as my feet hit the dirt, I got a mother. right? Mother Earth around me.
It's interesting that perspective too, because it is kind of rampant in the last few years. It's like even something as simple as meditation, which is the most basic possible thing that you could ever do, which is sitting and focusing and breathing and being mindful, and yet that's somehow considered like a new age, anti-traditional type of thing. And I can't quite grasp what that's about, because it's essentially you're sitting still and connecting with what's there without trying to warp it, which seems to me like the most fundamental thing the human body can do.
It absolutely is. And I think meditation is the solo number one best thing we can do for ourselves, outside of diet and exercise and everything else. Is that. And that's where nature gives you that space. And for me, I needed something drastic. And when you're in grizzly bear country, you better be in the moment, and you better have your head on a swivel, and you better be paying attention. And if you're thinking about what happened yesterday or last year or what you're going to do next week, you're already in a bad spot in grizz country. So there's freedom in that, when you have to, you're present, the wind shifts and you smell it, right? The birds start alerting. You're listening. What are those alerting on? That's not me. It brings you into that. You're using all of your senses, right? We're getting things heightened. We're smelling, we're seeing, we're breathing, we're connecting. Our heart rates come down, our blood pressure comes down, right? It's the best pharmacy. And it's so funny how, like with my native friends, so many things are becoming very popular native now. And they kind of laugh at these. People are introducing these as like new therapies or something. They're like,
new age. Yeah.
Really? New age? Because we've been doing this for 12,000 years, but if you want to call it new, that's up to you.
It's in the word native that implies that it's not new.
You would think, right? Yeah. But even some of that, she was so funny when she's like, oh, you like new age? And I'm like, no, this is new. Well, you're printing off Xerox copies and we're sitting around in group under bad lights that are flickering and we're reading canned statements for group therapy. This is new age. This is what doesn't work, right? We've proven that this doesn't work.
Well, it's kind of how we are though as humans, right? We find there's a thing that pretty much works. We go the extreme, opposite pole, and then we slowly start coming back to the solution. And I guess that's just the the tides of humanity. I think
it's the pendulum, right? We rarely get it to swing center. It goes wild, just like wildlife. When I guided and people come out and they understand that there's a balance in nature, but people think it's a 50-50 balance, and it's not. Nature swings wildly. Deer populations go way up and then they come crashing down, and right. So there's a balance, but it's not this. People confuse balance with 50-50, right? And they don't think long-term balance, right? They want balance today.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about so much on this podcast. Is just nobody understands that. Yeah, the swings in the pendulum are so wild and wacky and crazy, and the earth and nature is constantly shifting and constantly changing for thousands of years, and day to day. And it's funny because we see it. Whenever I give a tour at the at Wolf Connection, and people come there and they're wanting to get back to nature, and it's one of those things. I think if nothing else has come out of the last 2.5 or so years with COVID, it's people maybe starting to figure out what you, Brad, figured out when you had your tragedy, is that people, maybe we need to center ourselves again and go back to these places and sit under trees and listen to the streams and just be in a place where there's not a million things going on at once. And it's refreshing to see that. And hopefully that stuff takes hold more often,
When we get past that, especially for guys, that toxic masculinity, right? That less than 24 hours after our daughter had died, I was at our big table and surrounded by in-laws. And, I started to cry. And my ex-wife's grandma said, knock it off, men don't cry. And I said, oh, okay. And her grandpa's a World War II vet, and he just kind of gives me that look like, geez, right? So I knew right then, okay, I'm just going to drink, right? So that's what we'll do, right? I'll take my sadness out in the garage with the Coors Light, right? And so especially as men, we get locked into that John Wayne type, American badass that we don't, mountain men don't go sit by the river and meditate. And I'm like, yeah, they do. And if they don't, they should. And a lot of them actually do, right? And we get past that to realize that, we have to get in touch with these things. We have to deal with these things. They don't go anywhere, if we don't deal with them. And the fact that guys can't cry, guys can't lean into each other, guys can't text each other. And, we had a group that we're all hunting, that kept the phones on just in case. And afterwards, one of my Marine buddy goes, just because hunting season over, does that mean we can't text each other? We love each other anymore? I said, no, dude, we can keep doing that. So we got a group that every once in a while, we just check in and, hey, I love you guys. I hope you guys are doing well, right? And it is that, right? That connection. And it's all people that are outdoors people, right? And they all get it, right?
Yeah. I think it's something too that in all these discussions we found is that it seems as though the individuals like yourself or the Casey Andersons or the any of the scientists, people that live in the outdoors, they're starting to bring this stuff, I think, to the forefront with individuals that live in the cities and live in the bigger suburban areas and saying, hey, there's a different way to do things. And there's a different way to go through life or challenges that come through as opposed to what we consider now as the normal, like you were saying, Stephen, is, talk therapy and I'm not discounting talk therapy because it works for people, but there are a multitude of other ways that people can go through tragedy, go through stress, go through heartbreak, things of that sort. And it's good to see that there's at least a little bit of an open door that people such as yourself, Brad, are able to bring that to the forefront. And I think that's so key for that to happen.
I think it's crucial when you go, look, the worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you, right? So we can't compare things when people say, I can't imagine. Well, I can't imagine, what's happened to other people. We all have our things to deal with. But what really stuck it for me is I was going to see a psychoanalyst, and after months and months and, a lot of money out of pocket, I said, when are you going to give me some tools? Because every time I come here, we just rip stuff open and then I go get drunk.
Right.
Because I feel horrible about all this stuff. And he goes, oh, Brad, I've got people who've been through a lot less than you, and they come to see me once a week for years. He goes, you should just consider that you'll be in intensive therapy and on meds probably for the rest of your life. And I said, what do I owe you? He said, are we done here? I said, we're done. We're done here. And I appreciate it. And I really do. He tried really hard to help me. But what I needed was something that I could tap myself. I was sick and tired of going to therapists. I was sick and tired of going to pharmacists. I was sick and tired of going to doctors. I was sick and tired of going and having to tell this horrible story over and over and over again to go get help from someone else or something else, when I was starting to learn that what I needed was already hardwired inside of me. I just need to learn how to tap it, right? So then, like people wanted me to talk about, can you come talk about team building? I said, I don't know anything about team building. I don't know anything about team building. I know the worst things that happen to us, we're usually alone and it's 2 a.m. So you got to learn to be able to source that out of yourself, right? You can't call a psychoanalyst or grab the dang Xanax bottle every time something doesn't feel right. We have to learn to do that within ourselves. And we have it all right here. And so that's why it was important for me. I was just sick of relying on people and pills and booze and all of that. No more BS, no more lies. Let's get to the heart of the matter and let's get better, right? Let's find a way to start getting better so I don't have to rely. I mean, I've put grocery baskets down in the middle of the store and close my eyes and do some deep breathing when I feel the walls. I don't care who's around me. If I'm having a moment, I'm going to take a moment, right? And then I feel better. So, I think it's important.
It makes me think it's so easy to feel like life just is against you, and I think one of the strongest pieces of evidence that life is fundamentally for us and that, we're built to make it through these types of hardships is that two of the most effective tools that we have, to take our well-being into our own hands in any moment are the most readily available and the most simple. Breathing and training ourselves into stillness. Of course, working in conjunction with classic therapies and Western medication, of course, when those are needed.
I think the tides are turning for that. I think a lot of more people are starting to teach that too, that more self-resilience instead of that codependent with a therapist. And, if I needed medicine for a while, and I needed some therapy for a
Absolutely.
while.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
and I don't knock
100%.
any of
Yes.
that. And
No.
if anybody needs, always reach for it. I just, like my dad used to say, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough.
Yep.
So I just kind of hacked and cleaved it.
Yeah.
I would not recommend the way I went. And that's why it's so important for me to share this journey, and how I don't want people to go through what I did. I don't want them to have to go up and down mountains and scream and yell and drink and fight nature and all. There's an easier way. I really took the hard side, went up the hard side of the mountain.
And I mean, there's a place for all of those things, medicines and therapies. I think like you said, I think the tide is turning on that. Interestingly enough, going back to the most like primal things we could possibly do to help ourselves. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what is it coming out of all of this then? Do you feel that because you said you're a great storyteller, and I can't wait for your book to come out so I can read it and really dive into it more. But when you're doing the photography and the filmmaking and the conservation aspect, when you're bringing all this stuff to other people's attention about bears and lions and wolves, is there some part of you that's trying to channel? What are you trying to channel into these stories and these vignettes and these photographs? Is there something specific that you go out each time to try and find? Is it stuff you're pulling from your past to try and send a message? What are the things that you look to do on each and every project that you end up doing?
Good question. Anymore I go out, especially if I'm not shooting for a project. If I'm just shooting for myself, I'm very happy to just take what nature gives me. And I don't stress those 20 days in a row without anything anymore, because I've enjoyed it and I've been out there and I have taken time to breathe. Right now, I only take projects that are passion projects for me, like the grizzly bear film we just did with Save the Yellowstone Grizzly with Doug Peacock and Terry Tempest Williams, and Jeff Bridges. And we've got another one in the works that I'll be working on at some level with those guys. Again, another new film. I think part of it is maybe it's just that Midwestern value thing, is that we pay people back. You give back, right? And when I realized what had done this wild and nature had done for me, and then I guided for years and watched it connect with people. And then I started working with special needs kids and veterans, combat veterans. And so I watched it work in them. Nature, being out in nature, it just became so important for me to save that nature, to preserve that. It's evaporating so fast around here, and especially here in Yellowstone, right, where everything's so hot right now, and they're just everybody's buying it up, and there's not a stinking drainage out here that doesn't have a trail for it. So where are the grizzly bears supposed to go, right? There's nothing that doesn't have a through hike going through it anymore, right? So before it's all gone, I'd like to protect as much of it as we can. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe will never visit Yellowstone, but they need to know it's there. They need to know that wild's there. There's something that's very primal that's still inside of us, right? That needs to know that, they sit in a cubicle somewhere selling something they don't like, and they got pictures of Yellowstone on the wall because that's what gets them through the dang day, right? So we need to protect that wild, and it's not ours. It's future generations that, it's medicine to me. That's all medicine. And when it's gone, it's gone. For this last film, we tried to find a tribe on the plains that we could possibly film through a grizzly bear ceremony, any of it, a little bit, just interview. And I talked to some of my people in the tribes, and they said that's gone. Once the grizzly bear is gone from the landscape, those ceremonies go with it. So these plains tribes around here that live with grizzly bears for eons, those ceremonies are gone. When the animal leaves the landscape, the medicine goes with it. And so that's why it's so important, because I know that's the only thing that healed me, really, that gave me a safe place. The safest place for me was in dangerous country. And I think we don't all need grizzly country, but maybe the most important wild places are in our hearts, that we need to preserve and save for other people. So that's my focus now is conservation work. I go out and shoot for myself, and I'll maybe take some film gigs here and there, but I really just want to do things that are more legacy work now, something to leave behind.
Yeah, it's very cool. Actually, speaking of Yellowstone predators specifically, that picture behind you on your left behind you with the full pack there, I feel like that picture has been circulating like crazy. We saw it on a billboard. We've seen it in a restaurant in Gardner. I think I saw a social media post where maybe you gifted it to Doug Smith or something like that. Can you tell us the story about that photo and how that photo came to be?
Yeah, another crazy, dark, icy road morning, heading to Yellowstone. I got about halfway there, and there's elk all over the road. And I'm like, dude, no picture's worth dying for. Just go home. It's just a sheet of ice, on 89, as you know, like coming in. It's like elk everywhere. So, anyways, I decided to push through. I'm like, just go. You're halfway here. We get in. The Wapiti pack had been around. Nothing. Nobody's seen them. A little bit of howling or something, and then we just heard this group howl. They came pouring down off the hill. They centered right up in front of me and Bob Landis and a couple other people right at Elk Creek, and they were actually facing out and howling at Junction Butte wolves, looking straight out. And then one lone wolf, this was Christmas Eve or the 23rd, right at Christmas, one lone wolf howled behind us, and the whole pack snapped their head around and looked. And it was such an amazing moment. I was like, oh, it's the whole pack. I'm like, oh, I should shoot this. And I only got, I think, 3 or 4 photos where every one of their eyes is open. So I think there's 14 or 15 wolves in that shot, and every one of them has, you can't put 15 people together in a group photo and get everybody's eyes open. So it was one of those moments where I get too relaxed of like, oh, wow, what a magical moment. Maybe I should take a picture.
That's the best.
And so, again, that's why, I've donated that everywhere I can donate it. That'll help with wolf conservation. Wolf of the Rockies has it on a billboard. And Doug Smith, of course, who is very impactful. And Doug knows my backstory. And he knows what the wolves meant to me, and that it was such a magical place to be for a traumatized person. So that's the kind of work I want to do with the work I do now.
Man, that's an incredible story. Yeah, I think Elena actually, Stephen, wanted to buy that photo.
I think she did. I thought she
didn't buy it.
She didn't get a small one?
No, she did. No, she didn't. I think we left before, and she's been kicking herself. She might actually buy it from you, Brad. So you may get an order for that one. I wanted to touch. There was one. I'm on your website now, and I'm in your portfolio, and it's this white wolf. I mean, essentially on a white background, and it's obviously there's snow and everything around it. What this shot? I don't know what it is, but I'm drawn to it. What was? I don't know if you know the photo I'm talking about, but where were you when you took this shot, and what is? I don't know what was going through your mind when you saw this, because it's such a.
Is it in portfolios? It's in portfolio.
It's in portfolio. Yeah, it's the first. Yeah, he's got a cougar on the right, and then the wolf is just in this white background. It's gorgeous. What's behind that photo in terms of where you shot it and how just you were able to get that shot ready to go?
Yeah, that's the Wapiti alpha female. She's in this the group shot too. She's out front in that one, and it was right about the same time, and actually right about the same place. They were visiting Elk Creek a lot during that time, and it was a foggy, gray, monotone morning. And she was, I don't know if she was hauling back to part of her pack or again back to the Junction Buttes, but it was one of those moments where just like a little shafts of light came through and just hit like the general vicinity where she was howling. And so I cracked a few shots and was able to get her breath coming out. And I think she even got one, when you see a dog really, really getting into it, their back feet come off the ground, like to project. So she was really letting it out that morning. And she was important to me because her mother was the white alpha female from the Canyon pack. So she comes from royal bloodlines, and her grandmother was white wolf from the Hayden pack. And so her mother, the white Canyon alpha female, was one of the first wolves I saw in Yellowstone. And I knew nothing about wolves when we moved out here. And
I saw this all white wolf and I'm like, oh, she made it all the way from Alaska. And they're like, no, dude. Like, oh, there's white ones too? Like, they don't all look like the Blue Buffalo commercial with blue eyes and gray muzzles. And so this wolf was very important to me, that lineage. And she since, I got some more photos of her. So that was right around Christmas of 2021. And then I saw her on Valentine's Day, I think right around then. It may begin in April, but she passed away last year. So she's now the third white alpha female in that line that's passed away. And I think she has one of her daughters is actually getting a little bit lighter now. So she may be the fourth in that royal bloodline. So it's just, again, it's those moments being out there and just being aware. And I've learned so much through photojournalism that crossed over to wildlife photography. I shoot with both eyes open as much as I can, so I can see if there's something coming in or coming out. You know, I'm always checking my six, looking around behind me, looking. As a photojournalist, I'd literally roll up on a scene and have 15 minutes to go. You know, it's like the firemen throwing candy to the kids or something at a parade. Like, my editor would be screaming for the shots in 15 minutes. So you have to, like, where's the greatest action as fast as I can get it, click, 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 and go. And that really helped with wildlife photography, except the patience part. I had to learn patience, but I got good at anticipating action and then from watching wolves and from watching bears and watching when they disappear down here, they like to come out this corridor. And if I get here with this nice background, you know, to kind of set some shots up, right? Just set the back, you know, you're always looking for the light, the critter, and then the background, right? That trifecta. So if I can even just get the light in the background, I'll set up there and just hope the animal walks through. I'd rather do that than shoot a bunch, 200 cruddy shots I'm just going to go home and delete. But those moments like that are just magical when the sun, you know, it really is one of those things like, did that just happen? Did the light seriously just come down and hit a white wolf howling out with, you know, just a white scene around her? So it's nice to enjoy those moments when I shoot for myself that I can, instead of being on a project and having to rush, to actually kind of try to be there and get the job done.
Any, you ever have any bluff charges from a grizzly or anything?
Yeah, Casey and I actually had one that's on YouTube with a sow and a cub that charged us when we were filming just a little spot. That one was probably the closest. I've had a couple others that, you know, far off, kind of nothing close, bluff charge. I've had a couple. It's funny, there's another one on there. It's called Snow Grizz on my website. And that was a grizz that was outside of the park. I just moved there. I was chasing this bear around with a camera, just doing everything stupid. And the next day I'm all proud of my shots. And Casey Anderson, my new friend, comes over and I said, hey, look at these shots. And I'm scanning through them, click, 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 click. And he goes, stop, go back. So I go back a couple shots and he goes, there. If you ever see that look from a bear again, you're going to get hammered. And I was like, what? The bear turned sideways and he turned his head down and low and looked sideways at me with his ears back. It's showing a lot of the whites of his eyes. I had no idea that was an aggressive posture, right? I mean, I was getting him, that's full frame. And I was chasing him, like tracking him through the snow. I'm like, oh, I'll try to anticipate where he pops out. And the one time he pops out way closer than where I was anticipating, right? Casey's like, you got a lot to learn, right, about these animals. So that was a real eye opener. I really feel like I have been handed a pass numerous times in the wild, and that's why I don't push stuff anymore. I really feel like the gods were kind to me, and the animals, maybe they thought I was so sick they didn't want to contract anything from me. look at this poor degenerate, depressed, this guy looks terrible, get away from him. Right. But I got quite a few passes to where I could reflect and learn on my responsibility and my role out there.
Yeah. What's that like for you now that you went from, like you said, chasing down for the shot, for the film, whatever it is. And now it seems like you did the whole 180 almost around the same time, right? You took that stillness and the meditation and everything. What do you see now when you go out, now that you're more centered and more present and not, you know, taking that shot from hundreds of yards away as opposed to trying to get the glory shot that would get a lot of press?
I think the big difference is back when I was filming and doing all that stuff, I was drinking, quite a bit. I was a binge drinker. So I may go for weeks without, but once my on switched worked, but my off switch was broken. So in September of 2018, I got sober and quit drinking. And that changed a lot of my connection in the wild. That's when I followed the orphans. They were a big part of my recovery. The wild was a big part of my recovery. And so now when I go back out there, I don't have that. I don't even know what it was that was in my body when I was drinking. I was just antsy and nervous and icky and weird energy. And I know I put off weird energy to animals. And maybe that's why I didn't ever get hit by anything. Now I can just go center and focus and breathe and watch. And I want to know why they do what they do. I want to see what makes an animal lift its head when the wind shifts, right? When they look up, I want to know why they look up. When they leave, I want to go see what that bear was digging, right? I want to be a part of that. And that's the photography that I want to teach moving forward, is not just clickbait, run, grab a headshot of something, right? You'll get a better shot when you understand your animal, when you understand their movements. I see photos all the time. They're a great portrait shot, but the animal's terrified. You can tell they've startled the animal, or it's a game farm or whatever, right? It's not an animal feeling relaxed. Like, I see people go out to photograph in camo and hide. I'm like, I want them to know I'm here. I don't want to surprise anything large. I'd like them to know I'm here and I'm calm and I'm just going to sit and I'm right here and I'll read body language. I've gotten pretty good at reading animal body language. And there's times where I'm like, that bear is not cool with me even 200 yards away. It's time to go. Leave them alone, right? I feel like I've been to the well enough that I don't need to push it anymore. And I should have never pushed it. And I don't condone any of that. It's very copacetic if I never get another great grizzly bear image, if I can just watch them, because just being in their presence, where those animals walk, is sacred ground to me. So if I can share some of that sacred ground, that's better than any image.
Yeah. I mean, this journey is really fascinating, Brad. I mean, it's something, again, I really can't wait till the book gets out and we can read more. I want to touch on your podcast too, because you have a podcast called Take It Outside. Are you talking about, is it more about the story of Marley, and do you touch on any photography and the conservation work that you do and the filmmaking and things like that? What is the podcast for you as another outlet? Is it the same as writing? Is it different than the writing and the filmmaking in terms of a process, or getting your voice out there?
Yeah, great question. When we first, I'm a crappy writer. And so I tried to write this book, and we tried to sell it in November of 2021 during the elections. And it just went flat. And in fact, was it Woody Allen that said, it's worse than dog eat dog, it's dog won't call dog back. So like, some people just wouldn't even call back. I had one potential publisher who said, ever since I've had children, I'm not into dead kid books anymore.
Oh.
So that stung.
Wow.
And I had many of them tell me that, it was a valiant effort, but you're not a writer. And I never wanted to sell this story based on sensationalism, right? Just the story of my mom and my daughter and grizzly bears. I wanted the writing to match the levity of the situation. So it was depressing. I mean, I'd put all my eggs in that basket. I'd got an agent. I thought, we were on the right track. One thing they did say is platform. As an unknown author, that it's so crucial. Not only, you can't just be a man or woman of letters these days, you got to bring them the audience too. And so the buyers. And so they said, build your platform. And one way I could do that was with a podcast. And the idea was to just kind of lay this story out as kind of cliff notes to the book, almost following along. And so I've been very lax on the podcast. I'm getting ready to crank things back up on that as we start to promote the book. I think the book will be out next spring at the latest. And so 6 months prior to the book, I know we'll start I signed with St. Martin's Macmillan, which is, I think, their third largest press in the world. So they'll have a publicist and marketing team and all that stuff. And I want to crank it back up, but could I read you a note I just got from someone about the podcast?
Yeah.
Speaking of, so check this out.
100%. Yeah. Go for it.
I was just thinking, I got to get back on, take it outside and get some new episodes. And then I get this. Hey, Brad, I still can't believe what I'm writing to you now. When I first heard your story and listened to your podcast, I was listening while I was at work, just dreaming of Yellowstone. Last year, I quit my job. I was experiencing depression I didn't know existed. Long story short, 12 months felt like 12 years, and I felt completely lost and like I didn't want to live. I was in Yellowstone for 2 weeks and got offered a job by a local guiding outfit, and I accepted. I moved to Gardner 3 weeks ago, and while I still struggle with mental health, seeing wolves or just sitting in silence by a river is healing me. Your story was a driving factor in leaving the job I had for 10 years to pursue my dream. So I want to thank you for sharing your story. I can't believe I live here now, and I'm excited to get to a point where I can share mine too. Everyone tells me they're so jealous that I live here, but for me, it's survival. And I think you can relate. Anyways, hope to see you around the park.
Unreal.
Right?
Man,
so I get
that
notes
is
like
awesome.
that, and it's like, and I get, fairly frequently get notes, but some of those like that are so poignant and so touching that, right when I'm like, as you guys know, podcasts take work. I script everything. I do it all myself. I lay in all the music. It's a full day work for, a half an hour or so for me anyways. And so, I'm kind of reluctant to get going. And then you get a note like that and you go, okay, that's what my Native friends call closing the hoop. When we share our experience, when we help to heal others, then they help others, then they help others. So we close that hoop of healing, right? Because when we all get better, then we all get better.
Better
Man,
gets, better
That's
gets.
incredible. That's right. Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, this is, yeah, and you've touched all the mediums. Have you closed, let me ask you this, in terms of closing the loop, because you've now hit, I think, every medium possible, because you've done photography, filmmaking, so moving video, still video, still photography, podcasting, audio, and now writing. So do you feel like your loop is closed, or is there another avenue that you may see in your future to do more?
I feel like I'm getting close to closing that hoop, but we're not quite there yet. I have the last part of that for me is starting a wilderness therapy center right here in Park County, Montana, and the place that saved me. And I work a little bit with the courts. We have people that they're not criminals, they're addicts, right? They just need some help.
Yeah.
And they've been through conventional stuff, and maybe they've tried some things that I tried. And I think just getting people out, getting them cleaned off, so to speak, make some room for some love, make some room for some hope inside of them, right? And show them that we can get better. That's my next thing. We're getting close to that, right? Getting close to getting this vision up and running. And I get, notes all the time. And I had one from a woman last year who said, my daughter's on heroin. I have money. I have insurance. How do I get her to Montana? How do I get her to you? And I said, I got to build it. I'm in the process. We're getting it going. And she said, can you put us at the top of the list? And I said, of course. And then she messaged me 3 months later and she said, you take her off the list. She didn't make it. So it's stuff like that where I get those notes and I feel like I got two little baby angel feet in my back, Marley's pushing to get this wilderness therapy thing done. That's the last part. I just want to get this done, get it open, get people better, get people feeling better, share with them the beauty and the wonder, the healing, the magic of nature. I just want to share that with other people. And then once I can get them set, I just want to disappear with a journal and a fly rod for a little bit and just go take some Brad time and just breathe myself and unwind. But I just feel this driving factor that to get this wilderness therapy center going, a wellness center going, and just, I don't want people coming back to see me. If you come back to see me, I did something wrong. I want to empower people to go do this themselves. You don't have to live in Yellowstone, right? You could be in your backyard, find your sit spot every day that you go to for 15 minutes and sit and just listen to the birds in your backyard. City Park, there's all kinds of places, right? I want to send people back out into nature with these tools. So that's, for me, that will be once this thing's up and running and I like to go sit in Lamar Valley, sit on the hill and look at the buffalo herd. So once I can kind of sit on the hill and look at this wilderness therapy, like,
Is it done? Is everybody running? Things are working? Okay, I'm going to disappear for a little bit, right? And go get a little wilderness myself. So that to me will be closing the final part of closing that hoop is when we actually can share this with other people and teach them to share it.
You're a busy man. You got a lot going on. I mean, Brad, it's all incredible stuff that you're doing. And listen, let us know when that center's up and running, because we'd love to have you back on to talk about it, to get the word out there. I mean, absolutely, we'd love to help you and help others so that they can get to you. Just tell everybody tell them about your website, any more details on the podcast and the book and things like that, and when people can expect, where they can order photos, things like that. Give them all your socials so they can check you out.
Yeah, so the website is bradleyorsted.com, and that's kind of one-stop shopping. So I'll have all book updates and everything else on there. That's got my store on there. I'll crank the blog back up here now that I'm almost done with the book. I'm feeling the need to keep writing, so sorry, and you're welcome in advance. Might be some new stuff coming there. Instagram is Brad_Orsted. You can find a lot of my stuff there. I post a lot on Instagram, and then Bradley Orsted and Bradley Orsted Photography on Facebook. So those are kind of the social media hubs. And then Take It Outside podcast is on Spotify and Apple. And it's been a while since the last episode, but I do have some new stuff in the work to get up to speed. So I think by the end of summer, we'll have at least a new season, if not two, coming out of that on a big push for the book. And my goal is, the book's moving along very well. The goal is to have it out, I think, by next spring. I would love to have it out. Marley's birthday is Earth Day. So it would be wonderful if we could release this book on Earth Day next year for what would be Marley's 14th birthday. And then, the future is crazy and fun and wild as Grizzly Country. I don't know what's next after that. We've got another Grizz film that we'll be doing with Doug Peacock and Save the Yellowstone Grizzly, and I'm sure I'll get pulled in a few ways, and I'll still do some stuff with special needs kids and veterans. And I get more out of that than I think I ever give to those programs, because I come away just full of hope when I see it actually, not just anecdotally or just for me, but when I see wilderness therapy work in other people, it's a lot of hope for me that we can do this. So that's what's next. And then, I try to find some trout that aren't very smart, and that about rounds it out. Tacos and yoga, and that's a day.
Love it.
Trouts and tacos. I love it. Man. So yeah, everybody go check out all that stuff. Brad, my final question to you is, when you hear the word wolf, what comes to your mind?
That's a good one. I think when I hear that, to me, it's that spirit of the wild, of the open, but it's also order. When I moved out, there was not very much honesty or order in my life. And the wolf was truth, there's honesty, and there's an order in the pack. And I felt like belonging. So maybe it is belonging when I hear a wolf. It's that pack, right? Because I felt like kind of an orphan, and I spent more time around wolves than I did people for a while. So maybe it is belonging, is that pack. Everyone has a spot in that wolf pack, you know what I mean? And it fluctuates. This guy may be on bottom today, and he may be on top tomorrow, just like people in life, right? So I wanted to thank you for what you guys do and for all of this. And I really, obviously, people have wolf therapy, horse therapy, animal therapy. I think just people in the presence of wolves, right? That's a great spot if they can't get out to Yellowstone. To see them, there's other places that they can go and just be around these amazing animals who deserve to be here, right? They're a keystone species, and they deserve to be here. It's integral that they're here. They serve a very important part of this ecosystem, of all ecosystems, right? So Same thing with grizzly bears that we work with, right? It's all about tolerance and compassion. And that is, people ask what's the most important country for grizzlies, and it's the human heart, right? We teach that compassion for the wild things, right? They're our brothers and sisters. So I want to thank you guys for everything you do.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you, Brad. And yeah, thank you for all that you've done and all that you're doing. So everybody, we're going to have all of the stuff in the description so you guys can visit Brad's website, look for his podcast, things like that. Oscar says hi too. All of you that have heard that in the background this entire time. Oscar always says hi. So
Oscar's been saying
that's right. Brad Orsted, thank you, my man. It was great to meet you, and this was a pleasure. And let's do it again soon.
Likewise.
Anytime you want to come on. Yeah. So how's to all you out there, and Stephen, I'll be with you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Looking to support Wolf Connection or sponsor one of the wolves in our pack? Just go to wolfconnection.org, click on the donate tab, and find out more information.